next few months or next few years even will tell us the end results. Probably right now we are still like, we are fighting for our rights, and AI people are like, fighting for the technology, which actually, like, we are not against technology. We are against the incorrect usage of, private data and copyrighted images and things like that. So
for most artists, ethics are not typically things to focus on when perfecting your craft. It's usually aiming to master technique or pouring your soul into projects with the hopes of realizing your imagination. And our next guest is a perfect embodiment of all these topics. From being a true master of his craft, with a deep understanding of tool, technique and theory, to making iconic art that is worthy on anyone's wall. But also to have their creative identity and style commandeered, stolen and plagiarized for the so-called advancement of technology and instant gratification. Please welcome Greg Rutkowski, who joins us for his second appearance on the podcast. And our learnsquared instructor shares his perspectives and experiences on involuntarily being at the center of the discussion and development around AI image making tech and the ethics around this, especially when he never consented to his art to be used in this manner in the first place. Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome back to the learnsquared podcast, and I have a very special guest on, a recurring guest, or should I say a returning guest, in the shape of Greg Rutkowski. Welcome, Greg.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
Thanks for jumping back on, and I'm pretty sure whoever's listening now is got a good idea of what we're going to be speaking about very, very soon. But since we last spoke, and if anyone's not familiar with the previous episode that we did, there'll be a link in the episode description. Please check that out, because that was another great episode too. I'm sure this one will be as well. But back then, which was last year or last summer, not the summer just gone, the one before, was celebrating the release of your course, Paint Like the Masters. And yeah, so there's been a journey with that in itself, and obviously a lot of stuff's happened with yourself, but I guess just to give people a quick recap on just how things have been going, how's it been going since we last spoke?
It was pretty busy. Just to sum up, lots of things going on. Like this year was like crazy, and it still is. Like, I'm not sure if this is going to happen. This is going to end well for me as an illustrator, as a digital artist, till the end of the year, or it will be like, whole another year of the AI, of all the things happening to the technology. But for me, I went more towards the traditional art. I find it really it's kind of like a relief for the stress that you have during the creation in digital media, like creating for clients, waiting for feedbacks. Like, it's a constant pressure, and then suddenly you can sit in front of the canvas and just paint. It's like a meditation. You get to, like, play with the paint. It's totally different control of brush, like natural brush, than digital brush, and it helps me a lot to keep the balance between digital and real life, basically, because we tend to sort of like go really deep into this internet era and the content. Like, we follow different artists as an inspiration. We draw a lot. We sit in front of the computer. We do a lot of things that are really focused on this digital medium, and we tend to forget about different things, like to sketch on a piece of paper, or just paint on the canvas, or just go outside, talk to people, not through the Skype or Zoom or any other communicator. It's just like, we spend a lot of time in the internet. So it's
and that's a lot of things to unpack there, particularly, like, I guess it's almost, I mean, people have said and it's kind of been like I guess you could say a fashionable term where people have had a technological detox or like detox from their devices for either unintentional reasons or they've done it on purpose and they felt great about it. And that's kind of like what you've just to some of what you pretty much just said. It's I guess it's like a detox from the digital space. And even prior to this, we were just sharing our war stories about how that has damaged our body, kind of like this kind of
Yeah.
profession, and that's one aspect to it as well. But the mental side of thing is huge, and it's interesting you mentioned about the way we communicate digitally as well. Like I still haven't gotten used to, and this is obviously going to be the 51st episode of the Learn Squared podcast, so which is purely digital conversations. But
Yeah.
I've still yet not gotten used to communicating digitally, like electronically. I always prefer face to face. That's probably what I grew up on. But it's also interesting because there's a huge generation now, well, the future almost. We've got children, their future is going to be pretty much like this, where it's purely that's all they've ever known. And the face to face is going to become the exotic way of
Yeah.
communicating. Um, but it's also interesting, God, because you kind of mentioned that in our previous episode as well, where we spoke about the differences between your traditional workflow versus your digital one, and it was a beautiful way that how you kind of combine them and how they translated into each other, fed into each other. But before we jump into the AI stuff, let's say that whole thing had never happened, or you were not at the center of a lot of the stuff that never happened, and it was kind of still like you're kind of on the outskirts. Do you think you still be going through this right now, like having this epiphany where you're thinking, I'm going to connect more with traditional? Because I believe even last year you were saying that you were getting more back into doing more traditional stuff. So is this always going to be on the cards, or has the AI stuff really kind of like convinced you that no, this is kind of the way I need to go forward now?
I mean, that was like the process that wasn't really associated to AI. It was like AI was something additional. Like the
Mm-hmm.
process to go back to the traditional art, to the canvas and paint, was like natural process in my opinion. Like for me, especially because I've started to paint in oils and acrylics before I jumped into digital
Yes.
art.
Yeah.
And digital art was like, and still is like a really nice adventure, really nice new medium, because when you paint an acrylics or watercolor or gouache or any other medium, you have to kind of like get used to that medium, knowing its strengths and flaws. And digital media is like a totally different one, but still uses the same methods, the same like
Mm-hmm.
knowledge, experience, and but with the flaws or the minuses of being in front of the computer for quite a while, and that brings a lot of issues with, especially with, to your health. And it's really like beneficial for our health to just jump from the digital art to like a piece of paper or canvas or I don't know, sculpture, anything basically. And I think like, despite the fact that AI is just growing and evolving, my sort of like direction in my career was like
Mm-hmm.
natural for me, because I really I didn't change that course and purpose, like with some really huge plan for the future. It was more like, yeah, I was painting digitally and it was really interesting and it still is, but I was trying to achieve something that I was achievable just with real paint.
Mm-hmm.
And I've come to the point where it's sometimes it's pointless to imitate something when you have just real paint on a canvas, and you can paint normal physical painting. And sometimes it's on the other hand, it's like whenever you paint something really complex that requires like lots of corrections or using different materials, it's sometimes it's just better to create it in digital.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like depends on different approaches. And right now I'm thinking like it's like you're getting to know the Photoshop for the first time, and you're trying to sort of like understand every possible tool there. But the easiest one is just to paint on one layer with one simple brush, using just picking up the colors as it is. It's like it's the simplest way of painting, and it's also the most enjoyable one when you just don't think about any sort of like consequences of your movement right now. Like, oh, I just painted on the different layer. Like, Jesus, I have to reverse that somehow,
Hmm.
or undo something, or change the, I don't know what. It's like you constantly think about some kind of like implications of your decision, and it's the most the purest kind of a creation is just to paint on one layer, like on a canvas when you paint without thinking about. That's why I like acrylics actually, because you don't have to wait for one layer to dry. It's like constantly pure creation. You just paint as it is. It dries really fast, and it allows you for many possibilities where oil paint actually doesn't allow you to. But still, oil paints are much more flexible when it comes to changing color, and it's much more forgivable for especially new users. So yeah, that's, I think that's the summary of my decisions
Hmm.
for like 2 years.
And like again, we spoke about this last time, but even now, just to reaffirm it, is the way you describe how and why you enjoy working traditionally is a great reason, because it's not necessarily like I'm choosing to do this because it's a statement thing. Like, it's purely because of your connection with it. And if anyone who hasn't done traditional or doesn't really do it much, I'd highly recommend to go and try it, because, like you mentioned, like I think meditative state is a great way to describe it, because it's something that digital, as cool as the tools are, and 99% of the stuff I do is digital. I always still like get great satisfaction that digital can never replicate when you do stuff traditionally. And I don't even do it on your level, like not to that high quality level. Even just like, pen and paper, just sketching some designs before it goes into digital, or even with my kids, just getting some paint out and mark making. There's just something primal and that connects with, I think, something deeper than the digital. But and just to, I guess, like, unless I'm getting this wrong, but I guess one of the reasons why you switched to digital was kind of an experiment and trying to translate how you work traditionally into digital as well. But that was purely more of a commercial decision, right? Because obviously work demanded it. Is that correct?
I mean, that was like the decision, like to switch to traditional was my very first decision to do that was for to paint some paintings for Magic the Gathering.
Hmm.
But right before that, I was starting doing like I started doing studies because I was, I kind of like implement this habit in my workflow where I was just doing studies like an hour or 2 hours long studies to just create something that doesn't require too much planning, too much like constructing of the painting. It was more like, yeah, I have a photo or I have like an idea that I can create within 1 or 2 hours, and I was doing it in Photoshop. So after work, after I create some painting for client, I was still sitting in front of the computer doing studies, and then I switched to the traditional medium. So for client work, I was doing like, digital, using digital art. And then after work, I was switching to the traditional art, like just to do those studies in traditional medium, just to have this kind of like the balance in creation. And then I switched to the traditional medium. And like right now, I did like a couple of paintings for Magic the Gathering, like traditionally, acrylics and oils. But it's like, still like working for clients doing making traditional painting is like much different than working for yourself painting traditionally,
Hmm.
because it's obvious that when you paint yourself for yourself as a personal artwork, you don't have any kind of feedback. You just kind of like, you know give yourself a time to rethink some decisions and sit in front of the canvas and, okay, today I'm just going to do that, and I'll think about the next step because something is not right. Maybe I'll change something. And that is like the purest form of creation, because we are not ready to move forward because we have to think this through. It's not that I have to deliver that until tomorrow, like usually we
Hmm.
do for clients. It's like, okay, let's make the changes. And usually we are forced to do that. And we don't really think, we are not able to kind of like create something that we're not sure about it, but client wants that,
Mhm.
because we have to see that with our sort of like imagination, or um, yeah, I guess with our imagination, or planning structure, because we have
Mhm.
to plan something, we have to understand something, then plan something, and then implement this thing to our painting. And that's the thing that that differs from creating personal painting from the creating for a client. I'm not saying like, because most of the traditional or fine artists creating like usually landscapes or portraits or paintings that are based heavily on photos that are not really, you're not combining the whole like painting from the scratch or from tons of references. You're building it on a canvas. It's just so hard. And usually even old masters were doing like, tons of studies before they jump into the really huge painting. Like they did like tons of studies of cloth, of like, faces, different props for huge painting. And then after a while, after a few studies, sketches, they went into this painting. So it was planned. It was full of references,
Mhm.
and it's just much different than client work.
Now let's get to AI. My main exposure to this, and when I kind of like started experimenting with it, was, I believe, end of spring, summer, kind of basically when the Mid Journey beta was kind of available. I had heard of it prior to that because it was just like always thrown out. Either it was like a new technology, usually always related to speeding up a process of some kind, like whether it's to do with rendering or asset generation or whatever. I had no idea it's going to become what it is as now, and even in the last, you could say, month or even a week, it's completely different to what it was before then. But what's your story regarding that? Like, when did you notice this new thing called AI, quote unquote, art?
I mean, I've noticed that a thing a few years back. I guess there was like simple simulator of creating. There was like image to image generator. I guess not sure what was the company responsible for that, but it was like you could create some really simple drawing, and then it was like creating this beautiful landscape based on your simple drawing, and it was like divided to different sections, so you could use like blue color for sky,
Mm-hmm.
and brown for dirt, and green for grass, and it was like creating like, you know pretty cool images. And back then it was, for me, was like, okay, this is going somewhere.
Right.
Probably within few years we will have something really really powerful. And I wasn't really thinking about any implications, any consequences of that, to our industry. And honestly, like 3 months ago, maybe, when the everything just showed up in our industry, basically, I didn't think about immediately about the consequences for industry. I was like more concerned about where it's heading towards individual artists, like because of the usage of prompts or artist names as a prompts. That was for me what like really weird, because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think about it in this way. Like artificial intelligence was more like, I was I thought that it was using only a photos to create some landscapes, and I didn't think about using living artists as a style reference or style guideline for the AI. And like 3 months ago, I've noticed that lots of Google results, when I type my name in, were based on AI. Like most of the results were just images that were similar to the, let's say, to my style. It's really hard to judge right now, but it was similar, and it was signed by my name, so it was really concerning.
Wow.
And and people were messaging me that um, my name was really popular in those AI generators. So I looked into that, and yeah, it was really scary, because after a while using my name as an inspiration or reference for AI generators, I was really concerning about my future because we as digital artists, we kind of like live in internet, and we kind of use different sites, websites as a galleries like ArtStation,
Mm-hmm.
DeviantArt, and basically social media. And our career is based on the internet. And then when you type in your name, it should be like after many years of working, it should be mostly focused on your output, on your images. And within like 2 months, the Google results were totally focused on the AI
Mm-hmm.
uh, instead of me. And it was like, okay, 10 years of working on even more. And suddenly, like after 2 or 3 months, uh, after the AI, your name is starting to be like invisible,
Wow.
and or just flooded by this AI. So yeah, it was concerning, really, and it still is.
And like, I guess, and this is so fresh because this isn't like, something that happened years ago. This has happened very, very recently. Um, what did you think your options were at that time? Like, obviously, you mentioned that it was scary. I'm sure it's very surreal, even still now, thinking that all of this, and then, like you said, like the fact that when you Google your name, it's not even your stuff at the beginning anymore. It's something that's completely artificially generated. And I guess there's a lot of things to look at as well. Like, just in terms of the implications and the impact it can have, but also like the reasoning behind why simply train it on an individual. Like, I'm sure there's better uses for this. And yeah, so like, what was your kind of like thinking at that point in time? Like, was it just complete flat out like, okay, what is going on here? Or did you start thinking, okay, what can I do about this? And where did you even turn to kind of like to come to some kind of resolution or understanding?
Yeah, it was like pure chaos. Like when I noticed that, and I realized that this AI is not just like an experiment. It is like the huge progress in technology, and it's going to happen, and it will progress, and we can see how much it actually progressed from the I don't know, from the early release of the Mid Journey or Stable Diffusion. It went really really far, and it's just a few months. Um, so it was like pure chaos. I wasn't thinking about taking any kind of like direction. I was just processing what
Mm-hmm.
was happening at the time, and I was like thinking maybe this is just a temporary like
Mm-hmm.
thing. Maybe this will just vanish after after a few months, maybe, but of a month or two. But still, it's yeah, we naturally formed a group of people that are concerned about it. And and I think at the time, like most of the artists that had been used in this AI generator, they were also concerned, and they were like reaching themselves out, like just to talk about it. And um yeah, so I think like it's still like really really weird for me. I'm trying to, and most of the people out there trying to get um any kind of like they're trying to do as much as they want, as they need, as they can in this situation, and using form of products on ArtStation or DeviantArt. And this is what we can do right now. This is what we can spread the word about it. And I think it will change over the time. It will, like, new possibilities show up. And I think I'm trying to focus on what I can control. Like right
Mm-hmm.
now, I'm just focusing on my family and my work,
Mm-hmm.
and as much as I can do in between those two factors, really important factors in my life, I'm trying to help community and our industry to realize that this is not a tool. Not, at least it's not. It can be treated as a tool, but definitely it's a standalone generator that can replace human in probably in a few months. Right now, it's generating like really really uh, highly detailed and really good looking images, uh, based on, of course, based on artist styles. those stylized images, because those that are based on only photos are like more photographic one, and it's like it's really cool, but it doesn't have those stylized, parts with brush strokes, with interesting colors. And
Mm.
I'm not sure if you've seen that those images based. I think it was based on Frank Frazetta works. There was like series of that, and it looked really really similar to his style, and it was really concerning. And at the same time, it was like, despite the fact that there were few factors that were standing out, like hands or something like that, from the distance, you could tell that this is, really interesting artwork, and that's really terrifying.
It's so insane. Like, just it's crazy because normally when something happens that's seismic to anybody, it's normally a good thing or a bad thing. It's very black and white most of the time. This
Yeah.
is like, like there's so many things to unpick. Like, it's equally. It's kind of like maybe like when you kind of like from a distance, of course, not when you're in it, but like let's say when you see a forest fire, like, because it's so surreal when you don't ever see one daily. It's like, wow, that's impressive. Look how cool this looks, the colors and stuff. Equally, at the same time, something tragic's happening as right before your eyes. It kind of feels like that. And it's also insane because it feels very dystopian in terms of like how it's just kind of like the T-1000 in Terminator. It just touches you and
Yeah.
it can take your shape, and there you go. You don't need it anymore. Um, it's and then obviously like as someone growing up has enjoyed like science fiction and science fiction writing and speculation. This is living, breathing science fiction. But as someone who works in the industry and clearly like and this is interesting for me because when I first stumbled on it, I was someone who saw this as this is going to be a very cool tool for me because of the way I like to create my art. Like I want to be provoked with ideas. I don't want to replicate anything. Apart from like experimenting is to see why people have done that. Like I have no interest in making a final image in the style of X, Y, and Z. And even with my on the way have my work, obviously I got inspirations. I have people I look up to, and clearly there's like gold standards of what is considered great illustration, image making, and artistry. I've never wanted to be like anybody else. So for me, being naive, I thought, oh, that's cool. In my hands, it's going to be great. But it's kind of like the Infinity Stones. In the wrong hands, you can kill half the
Mhm.
universe. In the right hands, you can just kill Thanos. And it's also eye opening because when I first jumped on, have you experimented with these tools yourself?
No, no,
Okay,
actually.
good,
Yeah.
good, good. And it's also interesting as well, as someone who's experimented with it, if you never have, you kind of haven't missed anything. Like, of course, there's a whole current age of FOMO and thinking everyone's doing that. I need to kind of do it, and it's look at this cool thing. And I think in creatives' hands who want to use it for creative, it sounds very Star Wars or like Lord of the Rings. Like I'll only use it for good, not for evil kind of stuff. But you can't handle the power that's in your hands. Still, like true creatives, in my opinion, and true designers will always use something and make something properly and use it in the correct way. But what's eye opening was, and I guess you kind of seen it with, you look at ArtStation was trending, like everything kind of always follows the same formula.
Mhm.
And when I started using Midjourney, I've used a few others, but Midjourney is the main one. You jump in and you jump into this room with so many people, and it's a bit chaotic, but you start seeing what people are using. And literally, as soon as I jumped on, the very first thing I saw was it wasn't your name, fortunately, I guess in that sense, but it was in the style of X, Y, and Z. And I was thinking, is that what this is about? Like, this is so, for me, it's a bit like lame. It's a bit anticlimactic because I always
Mhm.
expected to see people explore things in a very cool way. It's like, imagine you could Google something, but then what you Googled was something that was completely original, at least in that sense. And there was not originality, it was a lot of mimicry, a lot of emulation. And I think that speaks a lot about, I guess, what a majority of people seek and what they want to do. And almost as if it's like a black mirror, so to speak, it's reflecting that back on how the technology has been used. But with that said, it's like we're approaching the end of the year now, and it's only like a few days away. And at this point in time, obviously the ArtStation and DeviantArt protests have happened, and I'm sure will continue to happen. And just to wrap up my point was initially I thought, hey, this is a cool tool, this is great. And then I had a month or so where I got busy, I didn't touch it. And then I got bored of it because I hadn't touched it. I thought I don't need this because I quickly realized that in my workflow, this is just helping me in a generative process, like, with shapes and something provocative as opposed to solution. So I thought I kind of don't need that. I could do it myself. So since then, I haven't really gone back to it and touched it. But then I thought it's not going to be too much of a problem because back then it was still very abstract. You needed to work the image to make it kind of look good. Yeah, fast forward only a few weeks, that's not even an issue anymore. But then the argument was like, oh, but the eyes look bad, or the hands, like you mentioned. Now that's not even an issue again. So it's like, it does seem like there's going to be a seismic change in terms of the landscape, and not just only in digital art, but I think in a lot of creative industries where people who need something creative don't need to go to creative anymore to get what they want.
Hmm.
So as tough as it is, normally I have New Year's resolutions or whatever, or predicting the future. Like, where do you think this is headed? Obviously, have made changes and started looking into solidifying a different way of how you create art, and it seems like it's going to be a clearly not a rejection of, but like a departure from the digital side of work. But where do you think this is heading, and the kind of like, I guess, changes that will happen to the industry and I guess to the world in general? I guess we can look at it in two ways. Like, what's the best case scenario and what's the worst case scenario?
Yeah, predictions. Like it's really hard to predict
Yeah.
anything right now because it's like probably the developers are much more capable of prediction, any prediction. But for me, it's like it does happen, does really affect our industry right now because people using that for generate some random images to sort of like help themselves in a creative process. And I think it will definitely head towards replacing some of the jobs in the industry, especially those that are responsible for early creation, like generating lots of ideas for landscape and then picking one. And
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, it's like we should rely on people, because I think it's the creative process is not like most of the people maybe think like, okay, I will generate thousands of ideas and pick one. It's the process that we like close your eyes, imagine something, and imagine it in different angle, imagine it with colors. And some of the people that I read an interesting article that not everyone can imagine something in colors. So imagination is really powerful tool. Some of the people are thinking like it's really relative. Like I can't tell that I see exactly like you see. Like the colors that I see are maybe, I don't know, less vibrant
Mm.
than colors that you see, or the things that I dream of, or how I dream of, or maybe how I imagine some things. It's different and it's really unique for each person. And I think like, because I'm judging from my experience, I think like whenever I create something, I'm trying to get really into that idea. Like there's like an initial thought about something. Like let's say even for client, like you receive the description and you have like the main character and some background, and that's it. And you could create like type this in an AI generator and generate like thousands of ideas and then pick the best one. And but it's not what you imagined. It's something that was generated by AI, and you can't really you can like correct it, you can polish it, you can sort of like add some interesting parts. I'm saying that as an illustrator, so
Mm-hmm.
not sure how the people will use that, like normal people without any skills in kind of correcting that. Um, so I think like in creative process, when I create on Photoshop or a canvas here, I'm trying to like pursue my idea, like initial idea. So I'm trying to get into this topic. So whenever I was doing like when I was doing like Anno 1800, I played like most of the music from that era. So I could get into this vibe. I was like looking for inspirations, references, to just get into this feeling living in that era and understanding the colors, understanding the perception of that world. And it's really important because that really affects your way of painting, then
Mm.
the further way of painting. And once you get that vibe, initial vibe, you get the references, you gather some ideas, and you start painting. And you are already there with your imagination. You understand the world, you listen to that. You kind of like all the senses that you have are there. So you just try to like follow them, and you try to create that on a piece of paper, on your blank canvas in Photoshop, or just canvas, like traditional real canvas. So I think that this creative process is like the series of events that are happening in your brain, in your body, because there are like senses. They're like you feel good about it. Like it's a kind of like meditation. Like I mentioned before, it's like this process is really enjoyable. And I think like creating something in AI, um, it's totally like it's a good name, like artificial. It's totally artificial,
Mhm.
and we kind of like avoid something artificial in our lives. Like we always want to have like I don't know, like real materials. Like you have natural made shirt,
Yes.
let's
Yeah,
say. You
yeah, yeah.
don't want to have like shirt with plastic or artificial material. You want to eat like real, let's say, vegetable or meat. You don't want to have like printed meat or printed vegetable. It's still like
Yeah.
technology. Like let's eat that. Like we follow the technology. No, it's we are a part of the nature. We are part of this earth, and we have to sort of like treat some things as a divine, almost divine things, like our, you know, it's part of the, I think it's a part of the Buddhism religion, where you kind of treat everything as a part of, like, we are living on one earth. We kind of have to understand how to live on that. We don't really want to separate ourselves on from different living creatures or living, I don't know, plants, anything like that. And the same thing goes with the body, with creative process. Like we have to like focus on one thing. Like it's almost like a mindfulness. We have to um, get this initial vibe, and this creative process is like the 90% of the whole process. And then there is like pure mechanical skill. Like when you understand something, you know exactly how to paint it because you've learned that light hitting surface of the water reflects, and you know exactly how to use that. And you can use those, like, let's say, artistic tools to kind of like express yourself. So you don't really have to paint exact waves. You can use really like this specific brush that imitates that wave, and with that brush leaves this mark on the canvas. In Photoshop, for instance, you can create this artistic feeling on this painting, so it won't be looking like artificial made painting or photograph. It will look like a painting, like a real painting. And that's sort of like an artistic tool that we use. But the initial idea, and we put ourselves into painting, as at least I'm doing that. And oh, sorry. And yeah, so I think like the creative process is like, it's much more than people think. And that's something that we have to fight for, because many people are not maybe aware of that. Because you have to go through that to understand that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like the thing you just mentioned there, like the creative process and even the act of making something. Take away art, for example. Like, let's say whatever you craft. I mean, we've all probably got stuff from IKEA, follow the instructions, etc., etc. But there's something therapeutic about when you build something from scratch, when you source something from scratch. And I get it with the modern day, with anything, let's say cooking a meal. People don't have time. People got busy lives. People got budget issues, that kind of stuff as well. So it's a case of normally whatever's the easiest option isn't necessarily the most healthiest option for whatever it might be. But people tend to go for that because it seems like they're funneled into that in a particular way. However, I always believe that people kind of always know that something's missing, and they always eventually, whether they know it or not, will strive for that more of a, I guess, a purist way of doing it. And particularly with creating, and obviously we're speaking as creative to creative, so we get it. We know like you behind you right now, like you've got your paintings there, but I'm pretty sure for you, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but you know the story that went into each painting, not only in the way you came up with the idea, but every single brushstroke and what it took to make that. And
Yeah.
that's your connection with it, and that's the story behind it. And I'm sure people who really enjoy creativity enjoy how it was made. Like, for example, let's take films, for example. Like, two of the things that I think are super iconic and have heavily influenced the industry, especially digital art, is the original Star Wars and, let's say, Lord of the Rings, for example. And both of those have had a lot of airtime and a lot of hours put in terms of how they were made. And that made them more magical. That made them more appreciated versus just the finished product. But then, with that said, if everything is made at the click of a button, and yeah, it's cool, you can make cool stuff, but you have no control of how cool it can be. Like, that still decides how cool it is, and that's decided on what the general consensus is based on the data sets and whatever they've used. So there's not really where you can kind of push it further, like you can a painting, for example. You can leave it for a week, come back and improve it. So what's there to enjoy? What's there to consume if artists are put out of business because we were not needed to create anymore? Companies use these tools to create something that we consume. Surely people will get bored of that and look at more towards creatives. And I guess this could be the few final points that we can use to before we wrap up. Um, like, I'm sure you'd agree, like, creativity, as long as humans exist, will never die. Like, it can't die because we can't help it. Like, every creative you speak to, it's not something they choose to do. I'm sure they choose to refine it and turn it into a profession, but you cannot turn off, you cannot hide that creative drive that's inside of you. So would it just be a case of we'll end up in our own little kind of ecosystem which thrives off the creativity, or are we finished?
No, I mean, yeah, I agree with the creative process and everything, but I think like there will be always, from now on, there will be always a division between people that are admire AI, and AI
Mm-hmm.
will replace some of our work or jobs, like especially like the especially those on the early stage of creation where you can replace some workers, but definitely we will still be needed to solve some really important issues where you have to use your creativity, you have to use your imagination, use your skills. But definitely, it will be something that I don't think like it's like a black or white. It's or
Mm-hmm.
like the worst scenario or the best scenarios. It will end up somewhere, probably somewhere in the middle, because as much as people that are admire AI, there are still like people that are really into the creativity and human craft. So yeah, I think next few months or next few years even will tell us the end results. Probably right now we are still like we are fighting for our rights, and AI people are like fighting for the technology, which actually like we are not against technology, we are against the incorrect usage of private data and copyrighted images and things like that. So because technology is still there, and it will be, and it will affect many industries, many jobs, and there is like issue with the music industry with AI generated music or AI generated voices that are like deep fakes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just emulates your voice, and it will probably affect most of the industries like film industry, and still there is like the same really the same issue here, like how to regulate it to let the AI evolve really safely, to not harm anyone, to not harm
Mm-hmm.
any industry. I mean, probably I'm not saying that because people tend to compare like invention of photography to like, and the reaction of real artists back then, like, yeah, it's something that will take our jobs and things like that. It's a little bit different, or a lot different, because
Yeah.
photography was just a tool, and it still required from the photographer some knowledge, some experience, creativity, and things like that. And I think AI, it's like at the first glance, it can be really, really useful and really like pleasant to use, really interesting to use. But then when you think about the results, like, typing some artists' names as a guideline for the AI to create stylized images, it's really cool. But it's cool because of this artist's portfolios,
Hmm.
and b- without that, it would be like probably photographic, almost looking like images, and it wouldn't be much different from different photographies. It would be like, yeah, okay, I created some random image based on tons of photographs. Like, it was like really cool example somewhere on the internet where people like typing in like picture of cat or picture of dog or something like that. It was like just random, create a random image of dog or cat, and it wasn't really interesting looking image. But whenever they typed in some artist name, it was much different. It created like,
Mm.
beautiful image of based on that artist style. So again, like, it's you know it's without permission. There was like artworks were taken basically and used to train this AI model. So that's the thing. Like, the technology is growing, it's evolving, and but we have to like somehow impact on it so it could evolve safely.
Yeah, and also that's one of the things as well. Like initially, it was cool. Like, okay, the cool is tech, and your first thought to like, oh, this is a new way of making something. Like with the first time you use 3D or a new renderer or whatever, like VR. There's always like something new. In the end, you kind of follow the same processes and come to the same conclusions, whether it's like marker making or shapes or whatever. Like it always distills something common, right? But then quickly you kind of saw that no, this isn't that. And those examples that you kind of hear where it's like, oh, it's just a change, like how this took over this and that took over that. It's not that either. And ultimately, like you said, it's like a respect issue, which is when it comes to legal stuff, no one really cares about respect. It's about what can be proven in law. But ultimately, that's what it is. You can take someone's stuff. One way of showing respect is either for some form of royalties or just asking permission, even, and for them the ability to say even no that you're not using this. So I'm sure that will kind of reach to some kind of conclusion. But when it comes to stuff like law and legal stuff and regulation, copyright, that doesn't seem like it's going to be as quick as the evolution of AI. But one thing you mentioned there, which I think is important, and equally, let's say I stand here right now and I'm someone who, because there's some people out there listening who absolutely love this tool. Maybe because I don't have to work anymore to like kind of craft something, which I think is a personal shame because the act of creating by far outweighs the final result for me. Um, and then for them, it's like, well, this is awesome. But if I was that person, choosing between an artificial intelligence, which just does what it does, versus supporting artists who I greatly admire and respect. If it was a vote, I'm always going to choose the artist. So you mentioned there about fighting, and you mentioned there about we need to fight and I guess take a stand. How would you advise or recommend for people to do that? Or where can they even go to kind of start educating themselves on the issue and to really understand the implications of this?
I mean, there are like tons of materials right now on the internet where you can read either like article, or just watch some videos on YouTube where people like explain disadvantages or flaws of using AI. And legally, I think everyone can just report any concerns, legally wise, to their government or any facility that is responsible for holding the private data or just responsible for keeping it in a secure way. And I think like that's the thing that we should be aware of, because AI, and I'm not saying like AI or just technology is wrong. Myself using technology, but still just get informed and respect people that were used to train that AI model, because without artists, it wouldn't look like that, like right now. And it's like taking someone else's job or labor for like past God knows how many years, and just put it into this training program, and then generate really cool looking images, and then like cutting off from artists and calling them like, oh, don't cry, we just use your images to create really awesome one, style is not copyrightable. It's like, yeah, it's really unethical like thing to do. Like it's almost like you took the voice of Michael Jackson, replicate it and sing like with the autotune, and then kind of like create a layer of his voice over yours, and then create really awesome voice based on Michael Jackson's voice. It's unethical. Maybe it's not completely illegal, but still like, it's really shady. And that's why we should have this moral and ethical rules in ourselves to just judge it, whether it's a good thing to do or not.
Greg, I know we have to wrap this up. It's amazing chatting with you, and so thanks for jumping on. And also, I look forward to the next time we speak, which I'm sure there'll be a lot of resolution to this. I hope. If not, we'll be speaking from an AI built prison, most likely, where rounded up and just shoved there so AI art can take over the world. But Greg, thank you very much. Have a great end to the year. And it's good to hear that like your solution to this is to still dive into creating even more. So
yeah, exactly.
That's great to hear, man. And yeah, thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
A huge thanks to Greg for sharing his experiences on the matter. And I hope his words spark you on your own journey to understanding this fast evolving space and how it impacts you. I would strongly encourage you to research and study the topics of AI tools and the ethics and issues surrounding them, and how this is affecting the creative industry, with the aim of being in control of your own choices in this space moving forward. Hit the links to follow and support Greg, and I've been your host, Aaron Danda. Till next time.